Under the fractured moon, a single snowflake traced the path of a forgotten prayer, landing cold upon her fevered brow. Ilara's breath came in ragged gasps, the wind howling like the ghosts of her shattered pack as it clawed through the jagged peaks of the Frostfang Mountains. Exile had stripped her bare, not just of kin and claim, but of the very warmth that once pulsed in her veins as an Omega of the Silverclaw. The Alpha's rejection still burned hotter than any hearthfire. His words, a blade twisted deep. "You are no mate for a king. Your weakness taints us all." Banished under the blood moon's gaze, she had been left to the mercy of the wilds, her body marked with the pack's ritual scars, thin lines of silver ink across her collarbone, now crusted with frost and blood. But it was the amulet that anchored her now, the one forbidden relic she had clutched from the temple ruins before the chase began. A pendant of blackened silver, etched with runes in an ancient tongue no living wolf dared speak. It hung heavy against her chest, its chain biting into her frozen skin like a promise or a curse. The snow fell thicker, blanketing the world in a shroud of white that muffled the distant weavos of pursuing hunters. Ilara stumbled forward, her bare feet numb against the ice-crusted earth, each step a defiance against the despair gnawing at her core. The air tasted of pine and iron, sharp as the betrayal that had driven her here. She had been the quiet heart of the pack once, her empathy a gift that soothed even the fiercest tempers. But in the eyes of Thorn, the Alpha King, it was frailty. He had chosen power over her, wedding the rival clan's beta for alliances forged in blood and ambition. Now, as she fled deeper into the storm-swept valleys, Ilara wondered if survival was just another illusion. A cruel jest from the goddess who had woven omegas to heal what alphas broke. Her legs gave way at the edge of a frozen ravine, the wind whipping her tattered cloak like ragged wings. She collapsed against a boulder, its surface slick and unyielding, and pressed her palm to the amulet. The metal warmed faintly under her touch, as if stirring from slumber, its runes glowing with a faint, ethereal blue, the color of moonlight on fresh snow. Legends whispered of such artifacts, keys to forbidden spells, born from the Deuce's own breath, meant to bind or unbind the souls of the marked. Ilara had found it hidden in the lunar temple's depths during a solitary pilgrimage, drawn by a pull she couldn't name. Now it was her only companion, a symbol of the destiny she had been denied. "Why me?" she murmured to the storm, her voice lost in the gale. The cold seeped into her bones, a visceral ache that mirrored the hollowness in her chest. Rejection was not mere words, it was this, flesh yielding to the world's indifference, the heart's quiet unraveling. As night deepened, the moon climbed higher, its silver light fracturing across the snowfields like shattered glass. Ilara huddled closer to the rock, her mind drifting to the pack's fires she would never warm again. The rituals of the full moon, where omegas like her danced under the stars, offering their quiet strength to the Alpha's roars. Thorn's eyes had once lingered on her with something like hunger, but duty had armored him against it. He was the king of the Silverclaw, burdened by wars that scarred the borders and whispers of a curse that shadowed his throne, a blight said to twist his bloodline, driving mates to madness or death. She had pitied him then, even as he cast her out. Now pity was a luxury she couldn't afford. The wind carried faint howls, not of wolves, but of the hunters, loyal to Thorn's new queen, sent to ensure the exile ended in silence. Ilara's fingers traced the amulet's edges, the runes rough under her skin, pulsing with a rhythm that matched her slowing heartbeat. In the temple scrolls, it was called the Whisper Stone, a vessel for spells long buried, meant to shatter bonds or forge unbreakable ones. She had never spoken its words aloud, fearing the power that slumbered within. But here, alone in the frozen wilds, desperation whispered temptations. What strength was there in silence, if not the choice to scream? The snow piled around her, burying her legs, and she felt the first true bite of hypothermia's embrace, a numbness that promised peace. Yet the amulet grew warmer, defying the cold, as if urging her onward. A shadow stirred in the tree line beyond the ravine, too deliberate for wind or beast. Ilara's heart stuttered, her senses sharpening against the fog of exhaustion. The air thickened with the scent of blood and musk, alpha strong and laced with something darker. Pain, perhaps, or the metallic tang of a curse unbound. She pressed herself flatter against the boulder, breath held as the figure emerged from the swirling flakes. Tall, cloaked in a mantle torn by thorns and strife, he moved with the grace of a predator, felled yet unbowed. His eyes caught the moonlight, glowing amber with an inner fire that spoke of royalty and ruin. Thorn? No, this was not her alpha's stride. This was a king haunted by ghosts of his own making. He paused at the ravine's edge, scenting the air, his broad shoulders heaving under the weight of unseen chains. Blood streaked his jaw, fresh from some skirmish, and a faint scar traced his temple, ancient as the mountains themselves. Ilara's omega instincts flared, a pull toward him that warred with her fear. Instinctive, undeniable, born of the moon's ancient call. But he was no savior. Alphas like him brought only storms. She clutched the amulet tighter, its warmth a secret shield, as he turned his gaze toward her hiding place. The wind howled louder, carrying his low growl, a sound of pursuit and peril intertwined. In that moment, under the moon's unblinking eye, Ilara felt the first thread of connection weave through the cold, a curiosity laced with dread, as if the goddess herself had scripted this collision. The snow continued to fall, burying the world in white, but within her a spark kindled, fragile as the runes against her skin. Exile had broken her, but perhaps in this stranger's shadowed approach, the pieces might find a new shape. The stranger's growl reverberated through the ravine like thunder trapped in stone, sending a shiver deeper than the frost into Ilara's marrow. She dared not move, her body coiled against the boulder. The Whisperstone's chain, a taut lifeline around her neck. Its faint warmth pulsed against her skin, a counterpoint to the encroaching chill, as if the ancient runes sensed the peril drawing near. The snow swirled in frantic eddies, veiling his form until he stepped fully into the moonlight, a vision of shadowed majesty, his cloak rent by claw marks that wept dark blood onto the pristine white. He was no mere wanderer. The air around him thrummed with the raw authority of an alpha unchained, yet his posture spoke of chains unseen. Broad-shouldered and battle-hardened, he carried the weight of crowns long worn, his face etched with lines of sorrow that the storm could not erase. Amber eyes, fierce as forge embers, scanned the darkness, locking onto her hiding place with unerring precision. Ilara's breath caught, her omega senses igniting like dry tinder under flame, a pull visceral and ancient, urging her to rise, to offer solace to this wounded king. But fear clamped down, rational and cold. Alphas devoured the broken, they did not mend them. She pressed her scarred collarbone to the rock, the silver ink of her banishment tingling as if freshly carved. He descended the ravine slope with deliberate grace, each step crunching the snow like brittle bone, his boots leaving crimson imprints that steamed faintly in the frigid air. Up close, the scent of him overwhelmed her. Musk laced with pine and the coppery bite of fresh wounds, undercut by something fouler, like rot blooming in royal velvet. A curse, she realized instinctively, the kind that twisted bloodlines and soured thrones. Legends of the Frostfang kings flickered in her mind, rulers marked by the Deuce's wrath for sins of ambition, their mates fleeing into madness under blood moons. This one bore such a shadow. His skin gleamed unnaturally pale under the lunar glow, veins threading black beneath the surface like ink in marble. Who hides in the storm's teeth? His voice was a low rumble, resonant as distant thunder, carrying the timbre of command tempered by exhaustion. He halted mere paces away, his breath clouding the air in ragged bursts, one hand clutching a gash across his ribs where fur peeked through torn leather. Blood seeped between his fingers, staining the snow a deeper red, and Alara's heart twisted, not with pity, but with the unwelcome surge of empathy that had always been her curse. She could feel his pain as her own, the burn of betrayal, the ache of isolation sharper than any blade. The wind howled in answer, whipping flakes against her cheeks like needles, but she remained silent, her fingers digging into the whisper stone. Its runes flickered brighter now, a soft blue luminescence seeping through her clenched fist, casting ethereal shadows on the ice. He tilted his head, nostrils flaring as he caught her scent. Jasmine and frost, the quiet allure of an omega adrift. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of recognition warring with wariness. "You are no hunter," he murmured, more to himself than to her, stepping closer. The ground seemed to tilt under Alara's resolve. The instinctive bond clawed at her, whispering of shared fates, of wounds that might mirror her own. Yet she denied it, shoving the warmth aside like an ill-timed flame. Curiosity bloomed instead, fragile and forbidden. Who was this king, fleeing his own shadows into her exile? He knelt then, slowly, as if every joint protested the motion. His free hand extended not in threat, but in weary supplication. The moonlight silvered his dark hair, streaked with premature gray, and revealed the ancient scar at his temple, a jagged line from some long-ago rite, pulsing faintly with the same dark veins that marred his arms. "The hunters close in," he said, his gaze holding hers through the veil of snow. "Silverclaw's blades, or worse, my brothers, hungry for the throne I can no longer hold." His words hung heavy, laced with the guilt of a ruler who had chosen duty over desire, alliances over the heart's quiet call. Alara glimpsed it in his eyes, the melancholy of a king who had rejected mates before, not from cruelty, but from the curse that devoured all he touched. Thorn's face flashed in her mind. Similar ambition, similar fall, but this alpha's sorrow felt deeper, etched by years of ethical torment. She shifted, the movement betraying her, and his head snapped toward the sound. Fear surged, hot and primal, mingling with the curiosity that rooted her in place. The whisperstone burned against her chest now, its heat spreading like liquid fire through her veins, urging her to speak, to weave the forbidden words that slumbered within. But she bit back the impulse, her lips parting only to whisper, "Leave me to the storm. I am nothing to kings." Her voice cracked, raw from disuse, carrying the weight of her own rejection, a echo of his unspoken wounds. He did not retreat. Instead, a ghost of a smile touched his bloodied lips, tragic and tender. "And yet, the moon binds us in its gaze, little one. I am Kale, last of the Frostfang line, cursed to walk alone. If you flee me, the night will claim us both." The connection sparked then, instinctive and denied, born from the shared chill of isolation. Alara's hand trembled on the amulet, its runes humming a melody only she could hear, an ancient tongue stirring, promising revelation amid the ruin. The wind carried distant weavos, a chorus of pursuit closing in, and in that suspended breath, fear and curiosity wove into something perilously like hope. But hope was a blade, double-edged, and she wondered if this encounter was salvation or the storm's cruelest jest. As the snow buried their tracks, Kyle extended his hand further, his amber eyes reflecting the lunar light like twin flames in the void. Alara hesitated, the world narrowing to the warmth of the stone against her skin and the pull of his gaze, a thread of destiny, fragile as frost on a window pane. "And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. Ilara's fingers hovered inches from Kale's outstretched hand, the air between them crackling with unspoken peril, thick as the snow-laden wind that battered the ravine. The whisperstone thrummed against her chest, its runes an insistent pulse mirroring the frantic rhythm of her heart, as if the ancient artifact itself urged her toward this precipice. She searched his amber eyes, finding not the predatory gleam of Thorn's rejection, but a depth of melancholy that mirrored her own fractured soul, guilt woven into every line of his scarred face, a king's burden etched in frost and shadow. The distant weavos swelled, a savage chorus echoing off the ice walls, hunters closing like wolves on a wounded deer. To refuse him was to court death alone. To accept was to invite the storm of his curse into her fragile exile. With a breath that tasted of iron and resolve, she placed her hand in his. His grip was firm yet gentle, calloused fingers enveloping hers with a warmth that seeped through her numbness, chasing the cold from her veins like dawn-piercing night. He pulled her to her feet, steadying her sway, and for a fleeting moment their scents mingled, her soft jasmine yielding to his stormy musk, a tentative bridge across the chasm of their wounds. "Come," he murmured, his voice a low anchor amid the gale. The caves of the whispering peaks lie near. They shield what the moon conceals. Ilara nodded, words failing her as he turned, leading her up the ravine's far slope with purposeful strides, his injured side leaving a sporadic trail of blood that the snow eagerly devoured. The ascent blurred into a haze of motion and sensation, the crunch of boots on brittle ice, the sting of wind-lashed flakes against her cheeks, the metallic tang of his blood mingling with the crisp bite of pine. Kyle moved like a shadow unbound, his cloak flapping like broken wings, but she sensed the effort it cost him, the curse's foul undercurrent sapping his strength, black veins pulsing faintly beneath his skin as if the darkness within sought to claim him anew. Empathy stirred unbidden in Ilara's chest, a familiar ache that had once doomed her in the pack. She saw not just the Alpha King, but the man who had lost everything to ambition's blade, much as she had been severed by it. Yet she resisted the pull, rationalizing it as survival's illusion, her free hand clutching the amulet as a talisman against deeper entanglement. They crested the ridge as the moon dipped toward the jagged horizon, its silver light gilding the entrance to a yawning cave mouth, a maw of stone veiled by icicles like frozen fangs. Kyle paused at the threshold, his ears twitching at the howls now perilously close, a cacophony of silver-claw trackers and, worse, the guttural snarls of his brother's mercenaries. "They sent us both now," he growled, amber eyes flashing with feral resolve. "Your exile marks you as prey. My blood calls them to feast." He drew a dagger from his belt, its blade etched with frost runes that gleamed coldly, and pressed it into her palm. "If I fall, run deeper. The cave's heart holds secrets even hunters fear." Ilara's fingers closed around the hilt, the weight foreign yet empowering. Her omega instincts flaring into something sharper, a quiet ferocity born of rejection's forge. They slipped into the cave's embrace, the world outside muffled to echoes as walls of glittering quartz closed around them. The air shifted, warmer here, laced with the mineral tang of underground springs and the faint, acrid scent of sulfur from hidden vents. Kale led her through twisting passages lit by bioluminescent fungi that pulsed like distant stars, their glow casting elongated shadows that danced like specters of forgotten rites. He favored his wounded side, breath hissing through clenched teeth, and Ilara's hand found his arm unthinkingly, steadying him as he had her. The touch lingered, a spark of empathy igniting into tentative bond, her empathy weaving through his pain like threads of moonlight through storm clouds. Deeper in, they reached a chamber where a natural hearth cradled a pool of steaming water, fed by geothermal veins that defied the mountain's chill. Kale sank against the wall, peeling back his torn shirt to reveal the gash across his ribs, deep and ragged, fur matted with blood that flowed too freely, tainted by the curse's black ichor. Ilara knelt beside him, the dagger set aside, her hands trembling as she tore strips from her cloak to staunch the wound. "Let me," she whispered, her voice soft yet steady, the first voluntary words since their meeting. The act was intimate, visceral, the heat of his skin against her chilled fingers, the coppery warmth of blood seeping onto her palms, the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest sinking with her own. She felt his gaze upon her, heavy with unspoken gratitude and wariness, as if her touch unraveled more than flesh. "Why help a cursed king?" he asked, his tone laced with melancholy, eyes reflecting the chamber's ethereal glow. "I bring only shadows to the light you carry." Ilara paused, the whisper stone warming anew against her breast, its runes flickering in response to the proximity of his pain. She met his stare, seeing the ethical torment that armored him, the duty that had driven him to reject mates before, to spare them his blight, much as Thorn had cast her aside for power's sake. "Because exile teaches that shadows are just unhealed wounds," she replied, her voice threading philosophy through the practical bind of cloth to skin. "And strength. What is it, if not choosing to bind what others sever?" Her words hung in the steamy air, a quiet revelation, as empathy deepened into bond, fragile yet unyielding. The cave trembled then, a low rumble heralding the enemy's approach, rocks skittering from the entrance as claws scraped stone. Kale surged to his feet, pulling her behind him with protective instinct, his growl echoing like thunder in the confined space. Torchlight flickered from the passage, illuminating snarling faces. Silverclaw hunters, their eyes wild with loyalty to Thorn's new regime, flanked by Kale's brothers' shadowed enforcers, blades drawn and thirsting. "The Omega Witch and the Fallen King," one spat, voice dripping venom. "The Deuce's jest ends here." Ilara's heart pounded, the amulet burning like a brand, but in Kale's stance, shielding her without demand, she felt the shift. From strangers bound by storm to allies forged in its fury. He lunged forward, a blur of amber fury and steel, clashing with the first attacker in a spray of blood and sparks. She gripped the dagger, her body moving on instinct, slashing at a flank that darted too close. The fight was chaos incarnate, grunts and clashes reverberating off walls, the scent of sweat and iron thickening the air, moonlight filtering through cracks to paint the melee in silver and crimson. Kyle fought with tragic grace, each strike measured by guilt's restraint, sparing killing blows where mercy allowed. But the curse lent him savage edges, black veins surging as he downed two foes. Ilara parried a blow meant for his back, her arm aching from the impact, and in that shared defense, the bond solidified, a visceral trust born of mutual peril. They retreated deeper as the chamber filled with the press of enemies, Kale's arm around her waist, guiding her to a hidden crevice where steam veiled their escape. Panting, bloodied but unbroken, they collapsed into an alcove, the sounds of pursuit fading to frustrated howls. His hand found hers in the dimness, a silent vow amid the aftershocks. The whisper stone cooled against her skin, its warmth now shared, as if the cave itself bore witness to their fragile alliance. Outside, the moon watched impassively, but within, empathy had kindled into something profound, a refuge not just of stone, but of souls daring to heal. In the hush that followed, Kale's breath steadied against her shoulder, his voice a whisper rough with emotion. "You fight like one born to queenship, not exile." Ilara turned to him, the weight of his words settling like fresh snow, tender amid the tragedy, a promise of renascimento glimpsed through the pain. Yet the hunter's echoes lingered, a reminder that refuge was fleeting, and the storm's true trial lay ahead. The alcove's steam-wreathed shadows clung to their forms like reluctant lovers, the distant clamor of retreating howls fading into the mountain's stony hush. Alara leaned against the damp quartz wall, her body a tapestry of aches. The dagger's hilt still warm in her grip, Kale's blood smeared across her palms like accusatory runes. The whisperstone hung heavy between her breasts, its chain a subtle noose, pulsing with an inner rhythm that echoed the thunder of her pulse. She watched Kale through half-lidded eyes, his chest rising and falling in labored cadence, the black veins beneath his skin receding like tides under a reluctant moon. He had shielded her in the fray, his body a bulwark against the blades that sought to sever their fragile thread. And in that act, something within her stirred, not mere gratitude, but a deeper unraveling, as if the goddess's hand had brushed her soul. Kyle shifted, wincing as he bound the fresh gash on his arm with a strip of his own cloak, the fabric darkening with ichor-tainted red. His amber eyes met hers in the dim bioluminescence, holding a vulnerability that pierced her defenses like frost through flesh. "You wield that blade as if forged for it," he said softly, his voice a gravelly murmur laced with wonder and wariness. "An omega of exile. Yet you stand unbowed. What fire burns in you that the cold could not claim?" Alara's throat tightened, the words evoking the pack's old taunts. Weakness, they had called her gift, the quiet empathy that read pains unspoken, mending rifts before they bled. But here, in this subterranean sanctum, it felt like more, a latent force, coiled and waiting, tethered to the amulet's ancient heart. She released the dagger, letting it clatter softly to the stone floor, and her fingers drifted to the whisper stone. Its surface thrummed hotter now, the runes igniting in a cascade of sapphire light that spilled across the alcove like spilled moonlight. The air thickened, charged with an electric hush, the steam parting as if in reverence. Ilara gasped. A sharp intake that tasted of sulfur and secrets as visions flooded her mind. Fragments of lore long buried, whispers in a tongue older than the peaks themselves. The Deuce's breath, the scrolls had named it, the Pathfinder's gift, dormant in omegas marked by rejection, awakening only under duress of true peril. She had always sensed echoes of others' sorrows, but this was revelation incarnate, a torrent of images, Kale's throne crumbling under blood moons, his brother's shadow lengthening like a noose, and her own scarred form, hand outstretched, murmuring spells that shattered curses like ice under flame. The light intensified, bathing Kale's face in ethereal blue, and he recoiled slightly, his breath hitching as the glow traced the black veins snaking his arms. "What sorcery is this?" he growled, though fear laced his tone, not with threat, but with the raw ache of a king confronting his unraveling. Alara's body arched involuntarily, the amulet lifting from her chest, as if drawn by invisible strings, its chain taut. Words formed unbidden on her lips, ancient and melodic, spilling forth in a voice not entirely her own. "Lunara Vethar, Sangra Elorim, break the shadow, bind the storm." The syllables wove through the air like smoke, resonating off the walls, and the whisper stone flared, a nexus of power that pulled at Kale's essence. He clutched his temple, the ancient scar there pulsing in sync with the runes, and a low moan escaped him, a sound of torment and release intertwined. The black veins surged, then retreated, the curse's foul grip loosening as ethereal threads of light extended from the amulet, coiling around his wounds like silken vines. Alara felt it all, the weight of his guilt crashing into her like a blizzard, visions of mates lost to madness, thrones bartered for hollow peace, a brother's betrayal seeded in cradle songs, her empathy amplified, not as burden but as bridge, channeling the spell's essence to purge the blight that had shadowed his bloodline for generations. Tears traced hot paths down her cheeks, mingling with the steam as she witnessed the core of him, a soul ethical to its marrow, rejecting love not from cruelty, but from the terror of dooming another to his fate. Kale's eyes widened, locking onto hers with dawning realization, the amber depths clearing as the curse's haze lifted. You are the whispered one, he breathed, the words reverent, laced with the melancholy of prophecy fulfilled. Legends of the Frostfang line flickered in his gaze, an Omega exile, bearer of the Pathfinder's light, destined to unveil the hidden paths of redemption. The amulet chose you, as the Dusa foretold. My curse. It bends to your voice, to the mercy you wield like a crown. He reached for her then, his hand trembling, not to claim, but to witness, fingers brushing the glowing stone. The contact sent a jolt through them both, a visceral communion. Her gift manifesting as the key to his unbinding, yet demanding a price, her own scars laid bare, the rejection by Thorn paling against this greater unveiling. Ilara pulled back slightly, the spell's afterglow fading, leaving her drained yet alive with newfound fire. The bond deepened, instinctive pull now laced with destiny's inexorable weave, but she resisted its full embrace, rationalizing the surge as the amulet's illusion. I am no savior, she whispered, her voice raw, the ancient tongue's echo lingering on her lips like forbidden wine. Exile broke me, this power. It may shatter us both. Yet in his eyes, she saw the truth. She was the key, the Omega born to heal the Alpha King's wound, turning rejection into the forge of rebirth. The cave's vents sighed, carrying the faint howl of wind above, a reminder that revelation was no sanctuary, only the prelude to trial. Kyle nodded, his expression a mask of tragic resolve, the scar at his temple now silvered and still, as if her words had etched peace into ruin. Then we face the shatter together, he said, his hand withdrawing, but the connection lingering. A spiritual tether under the moon's distant gaze. Empathy had transformed into purpose, her dom occulto no longer hidden, but a beacon in the gloom. But as the bioluminescent fungi dimmed, casting long shadows, Ilara felt the ethical dilemma coil within. To wield this power was to choose, his redemption or her freedom, compassion's crown or the wild's solitary call. The whisper stone cooled against her skin, a symbol of paths diverging, and in that suspended breath, the weight of destiny pressed like fresh snow, beautiful and unyielding. The alcove fell silent, save for their shared breaths, the revelation hanging between them like a veil torn asunder, promise and peril entwined under the goddess's watchful eye, like if you believe rejection can become destiny. The chamber's ethereal hush shattered as the cave walls trembled anew, a deeper quake that sent rivulets of dust sifting from the ceiling like ashen tears. Ilara's senses sharpened, the whisper stone's residual warmth a fading ember against her skin, as Kale rose beside her, his form no longer bowed by the curse's invisible yoke. The black veins had receded to faint whispers beneath his flesh, leaving his amber eyes clear and fierce, unclouded by the madness that had haunted his line for generations. Yet the revelation's glow lingered in the air between them, a fragile bridge now tested by the encroaching roar of the world above, howls that were no longer distant echoes, but a tidal wave crashing toward their sanctuary. Kale's hand found her shoulder, a steadying touch that grounded her amid the surge of her awakened gift. They come not just for blood, but for judgment, he murmured, his voice resonant with the melancholy of a king reclaiming his shadows. My brother, Riven, the traitor who sowed this blight in our blood for the throne's hollow gleam, and your pack, Thorn's blades, loyal to the alliances I once forged in folly. Ilara's heart clenched, the name Thorn a fresh wound reopening, his rejection a specter rising from the snows of her exile. The Silverclaw hunters she had glimpsed in the fray were no strangers. They bore the pack's insignia, silver claws etched on leather, symbols of the home that had cast her into the wilds. Now, they converged here, drawn by her scent and his blood, the past colliding like storm fronts over the peaks. She rose with him, the dagger reclaimed in her grip, its weight a reminder of the ferocity her empathy had birthed. The alcove's steam veiled their advance as they retraced the twisting passages, the bioluminescent fungi flickering like wary eyes. The air grew heavier, laced with the acrid bite of torches and the metallic promise of steel, as shouts reverberated from the main chamber, curses in the old tongue, laced with the fervor of betrayal unveiled. Alara's mind raced, visions from the spell's torrent replaying. Riven's shadow, a brother twisted by envy, poisoning the Frostfang chalice during a lunar rite to claim Kale's crown. Thorn's ambition, wedding the rival Beta not for love, but to bury Alara's weakness and secure borders against the encroaching wars. Her gift had laid it bare, the threads of deceit weaving through both their lives, binding them in a web of shared ruin. They emerged into the hearth chamber, where the steaming pool now boiled with intrusion. Torchlight danced wildly, casting elongated shadows that writhed like demons unbound. A dozen figures ringed the space. Silverclaw warriors, their fur-mantled shoulders heaving, eyes gleaming with fanatic zeal under Thorn's command. And Riven's enforcers, hulking shadows in blackened armor, their blades notched from fratricidal skirmishes. At the forefront stood Thorn himself, his frame imposing as ever, golden fur rippling over muscles honed by kingship's forge, but his gaze, cold steel, faltered upon seeing Alara, a flicker of something like regret warring with resolve. Beside him loomed Riven, Kale's mirror in form yet poisoned in soul, his features twisted by a smirk that bared fangs yellowed with malice, the scar of his own failed rite twisting his lip into perpetual sneer. "The fallen king and his witch," Thorn snarled, his voice booming off the quartz walls, the air thickening with alpha dominance that pressed against Alara's senses like a physical blow. "You dare shelter the exile who fled our justice? She is tainted, Kale, weakness incarnate, unfit for any pack, let alone a throne." His words struck like claws, reopening the ritual scars on her collarbone, the silver ink burning as if freshly seared. Alara stepped forward, Kale's presence a silent bulwark at her side, the whisperstone humming faintly, its runes stirring in response to the confrontation's heat. Riven laughed, a guttural sound that echoed like cracking ice, his eyes, mirrors of Kale's amber, but dulled by greed, fixing on his brother. "And you, dear kin, crawl from your curse like a whelp from the den. The Deuce's wrath was my gift to you, payment for the crown you hoarded. Now, with this Omega's blood, I'll seal it eternal." He lunged, blade arcing in a silver blur, but Kale met him mid-stride, their clash a symphony of steel and snarls that sprayed sparks across the steam-shrouded pool. The chamber erupted, Silverclaw warriors surged, clashing with Riven's brutes in a maelstrom of fur, fang, and fury, the air filling with the visceral symphony of grunts, the wet rip of flesh, and the coppery flood of blood staining the stone. Alara moved through the chaos, her body guided by the Pathfinder's lingering fire, dodging a Silverclaw blade that whistled past her ear. Thorn barred her path, his form a wall of golden menace, breath hot with the scent of pine and unresolved hunger. "You were mine to protect, Alara, until your frailty threatened the pack. Return with me, submit to exile's end, and spare this madness." His eyes bored into hers, a plea masked as command, the moral weight crashing over her, forgiveness for the rejection that had broken her, or war to claim the freedom her gift demanded. The pack's past loomed, fires she had mended, tempers soothed, now twisted into this betrayal, Thorn's ambition a mirror to Riven's treason. She raised the dagger, its tip steady despite the tremor in her soul, the whisperstone flaring blue as ancient words bubbled unbidden. fragments of spells that could bind or unbind, heal or destroy. Protection? You called it weakness when I saw your doubts. Thorn, the alliances built on lies, the wars fed by pride. What is strength if not choosing truth over chains? Her voice carried, cutting through the din, and for a heartbeat his resolve cracked, amber eyes widening with the echo of her empathy, glimpsing the queen she might have been. Across the chamber, Kale grappled with Riven, brothers locked in tragic embrace, fists and fangs tearing at old wounds. You poisoned us for power, Kyle growled, pinning him against the wall, blood streaming from a gash on his brow. But the curse breaks. I choose mercy, not your throne of shadows. Riven spat ichor, laughing through broken teeth. Mercy is weakness, brother. Kill me or watch her die for your folly. The choice hung. Forgiveness, sparing the traitor to end the cycle, or War's blade, claiming vengeance at the cost of his ethical core. Ilara's heart tore between them, love for Kale's redemptive soul pulling her toward union, freedom's wild call urging her to flee the pack's entanglements. Thorn advanced, but she sidestepped, whispering a shard of the forbidden tongue that wove ethereal chains around his limbs. Not to harm, but to halt, forcing him to confront the doubt she had always seen. The chamber stilled in fractured pauses, warriors faltering as her light spilled, illuminating the moral precipice. Pardon the past's architects, or ignite the war that would consume all. Kale disarmed Riven with a final restrained blow, the traitor crumpling, gasping. Their eyes met across the blood-slicked stone, Ilara's filled with the dilemma's fire, his with tragic plea. Love or liberty? Forgiveness or the sword? The moon's light filtered through cracks above, silvering the carnage, as the weight of choice settled like unyielding snow, demanding her soul's verdict in the storm's heart. The air hummed with possibility and peril, the goddess's gaze unblinking, waiting for the Omega's decree to reshape thrones from ruins. The chamber's fractured light splintered across the bloodied stone like the moon's own shattered vow, casting Ilara in a halo of sapphire remnants from the Whisperstone's fading glow. Her breath came in shallow waves, the air thick with the metallic reek of spilled life and the acrid smoke of doused torches. As warriors on both sides faltered, their weapons lowering in the wake of her whispered incantation. Thorn knelt bound by ethereal chains of light, his golden form humbled, eyes locked on hers with a raw plea that twisted the knife of old wounds. Regret for the rejection that had exiled her. Ambition's shadow now laid bare by her unyielding truth. Across the steaming pool, Kale held Riven pinned. His brother's sneer crumbling into gasps, the traitor's venomous eyes flickering with the terror of a throne slipping through poisoned fingers. The howls outside had stilled, the mountain's wind carrying only the echo of suspended fate, as if the goddess herself paused to witness the Omega's decree. Ilara's hand trembled on the dagger's hilt, the Whisperstone pulsing against her chest like a second heart, its runes a warm ember urging her toward the precipice. Visions from the revelation swirled unbidden, paths of fire and frost, where union with Kale promised healing for his cursed line, yet demanded she surrender the wild freedom her exile had forged. Sacrifice, pouring her gift into a final spell to purge the pack's betrayals, at the cost of her own light, or cure, binding Thorn and Riven in merciful chains, ending the cycle without further blood, but chaining her soul to the packs she had fled. Love was no gentle reward here. It was the forge of redemption, resisted in every fiber of her being, rationalized as the storm's cruel mirage. Yet in Kale's amber gaze, steady amid the carnage, she saw the ethical core that mirrored her own. A king who chose mercy over conquest, guilt his crown, and compassion his blade. What was strength, if not this, embracing the wound to birth the healed? Thorn's voice broke the hush, ragged and stripped of command. Ilara, I saw weakness in you because I feared my own. Forgive this fool's throne, or let me end it clean. His chains shimmered. Her spell's fragile hold testing her resolve, the silver scars on her collarbone aching with the pull of old loyalties, the pack's fires she had once warmed, now ashes under ambition's boot. Riven writhed under Kale's grip, spitting defiance. Kill me, brother, or watch her light dim for your sentiment. Power waits for no mercy. But Kale's hold remained firm, not crushing. His melancholy etched deeper in the lines of his face, the ancient scar at his temple, a silver testament to wounds chosen over vengeance. He met Ilara's eyes across the chamber, a silent communion threading through the steam. His guilt for alliances that had doomed her kind, her rejection an echo of his self-imposed isolation. The bond they had forged, from fear's spark to empathy's flame, now demanded acceptance, not as surrender, but as rebirth's defiant roar. The mountain groaned, a low rumble shaking loose icicles from the ceiling, their crystalline fall shattering like brittle oaths on the stone. Ilara stepped forward, the dagger slipping from her fingers to clatter forgotten, her bare feet leaving crimson prints in the pooling blood. The whisper stone ignited fully then, its light blooming outward in a cascade of lunar blue, enveloping the chamber like a veil of frozen dawn. Ancient words rose in her throat, not forced, but chosen, the forbidden tongue weaving through the air with visceral power. Lunara Vethar, Elorim Sangra, shadows yield, hearts unite, in the Deuce's endless night. The syllables resonated, pulling at the threads of curse and betrayal, the amulet's chain glowing white-hot against her skin, drawing forth her essence like blood from a willing vein. Light coiled around Thorn first, the ethereal chains dissolving not in freedom, but in revelation, visions flooding him of the wars he had fueled, the Omega's quiet strength he had scorned as frailty. He bowed his head, tears carving paths through the grime on his face, whispering, I release you, queen of your own wilds. The spell turned to Riven, purging the poison from his veins in a convulsion of black ichor that steamed and evaporated, his body slumping into unconscious mercy. The traitor's greed unraveled without death's finality. Kyle released him, stepping back as the light embraced them both, brother and rival, king and exile, mending the fractures not with war's fire, but with compassion's quiet blaze. Ilara felt the cost keenly, her gift ebbing, a hollow ache blooming in her core, as if the moon itself drained her to refill the broken world. Sacrifice. Yes, but in union's guise, her light weaving into Kale's, their bond sealing as the curse shattered fully, his skin warming to true life, the black veins vanishing like mist under sun. He crossed the chamber in strides unburdened, his hand cupping her face with a tenderness born of shared ruin, thumb tracing the silver scars that marked her rebirth. You chose us all, he murmured, voice thick with emotion, amber eyes reflecting the amulet's dying glow. Not for reward, but for the healing we denied ourselves, my queen, my redemption. Ilara leaned into his touch, the resistance crumbling at last, the rational walls of fear yielding to acceptance's flood. Their lips met in the light's fading embrace, a kiss of salt and storm, blood and renewal, under the moon's approving gaze, filtering through the cracks above. The chamber stilled, warriors sheathing blades in awed silence, the pack's divides blurring into tentative peace as the spell's echoes rippled outward, carrying scents of pine and jasmine on winds that whispered of new dawns. Outside, the snow fell softer now, blanketing the peaks in a shroud of promise. The howls transformed to distant songs of unity. Ilara stood beside Kyle, the whisper stone cooling to a gentle weight, its runes etched forever in her soul, a symbol of paths chosen, wounds transmuted to strength. Rejection had been her exile, but in this renacimento she claimed her destiny. Not as prize, but as the Omega who healed the Alpha King's deepest scar, their union a testament to love's redemptive proof. The mountains sighed, the Deusa's breath stirring the flakes into a dance of silver and shadow as two souls, once broken, rose whole from the frost's embrace. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.